Hello, my name is Joseph Shaw, and today I'm going to be talking to you about wind power in this presentation titled Controversy in the Winds. This is for ABE 170A2 Online. It's being recorded with Cam Studio on May 1st, 2012. Today I'm going to go over the history of wind power, just briefly touch on the industrial growth, compared to some other sources, talk about government assistance, then we'll go into eco-friendliness, briefly touch on offshore wind, and after that we'll dive right into controversies and we'll conclude. So first and foremost, wind power is nothing new. People have been harnessing wind in their sails to get around for thousands of years, and still do today. As far as wind turbines are concerned, it was the Persians who are credited with first using turbines to pump water and operate grinding mills between 500 and 900 AD. The Western world got a hold of the wind turbine in roughly the 1300s, and they used it to saw lumber and even processed goods like tobacco and paint, along with a few other uses. As far as generating electricity is concerned, Charles F. Brush in 1888 was the first to build a really big machine called the Brush machine, and it produced up to 12 kilowatts an hour, which compared to a comparably sized lift rotor, would be producing between 70 and 100 kilowatts an hour. So it didn't really impress anyone in that respect, but still quite the concept. As far as industry growth is concerned, some statistics here, they're from 2010, but they're fairly recent. As of, there are over 38 states with installations, and 14 have had over 1,000 megawatts producing capability. To put that in perspective, Brush's machine could produce 0.012 megawatts, so how it's grown. Texas is by far the biggest with over 10,000. And as far as the productivity is concerned, it's only increased in leaps and bounds. In 1990, roughly 250 kilowatts could be produced per hour for a large turbine at between $11 and $19 an hour. And today, over 1.75 megawatts from a large turbine per hour at much less cost-wise, between $4 and $7 per megawatt hour. The equipment's a little more expensive, but the cost to operate the equipment is much less. When you compare wind power to another industry, we'll go with coal and natural gas. It's pretty dwarfed. Wind power, you see a $4 billion annual profit margin compared to a $105 billion profit margin in the coal and gas industry. And the amount of employees, the amount of businesses, it's all much smaller. Oh my goodness, it's very intimidating if you're the wind power industry, but it's really not, because when we look at the wind power development, you start way back in 1990, not even 5,000 megawatts producing ability. And now, 22 years later, it's over 50,000. When we look at the annual growth rate from 07 to 12, wind power growing at a rate of 19.3%, coal and natural gas only growing at a rate of 0.7% annually. So that's a much more impressive figure there, and much more intimidating. So we've got that wildcat there. As far as government subsidies are concerned, I only touch on this because it's very controversial, but the reality is that all successful energy sources, at least in the United States, have had some sort of government subsidies at some point, or for the most part. Clean energy between 2002 and 2007 raked in over $5 billion in subsidies. In that same time period, fossil fuels pulled in over $15 billion, which it's a much bigger industry, so it makes sense. And this is all done through tax breaks. And the controversy arises when people are saying, okay, well, why are we spending our tax dollars on this when we could be spending it on this? And it really shouldn't be that controversial. I don't know why it is, but just thought I'd touch on it just because. All right, and as far as the eco-friendliness is concerned, the Department of Energy aims to be at 20% wind power by 2030 for the entire United States. And with that, they'd like the carbon dioxide numbers down 25%. Wind power saves a lot of clean water. People don't really realize this, but each megawatt hour of wind generation can prevent the loss of up to 600 gallons of water from fossil fuel power plant cooling. And as far as the emissions to date, the wind power industry says that on average, 50,000 tons of nitrogen oxides and 75,000 tons of sulfur dioxides are being prevented from entering into the atmosphere thanks to wind power, so that's good. What about offshore wind power? So something you've probably heard of, but it's nothing new. Denmark had a farm over 20 years ago. And in the United States, the potential for offshore wind power is 4 times greater than the country's current total generating capacity from all sources. We've got a lot of coastlines and a lot of coastal winds. It's controversial because it's very expensive. They're hard to maintain. People don't like the way they look. But I mean, what isn't controversial in the energy business? And the image on the left here is a typical turbine, an onshore wind turbine, and on the far right you've got just a real impressive piece of machinery, a deep water turbine, down up to 200 meters tall. And we're not going to talk about it too much for time's sake, but just thought I'd show you an image to compare. So why is it so controversial? Well, it's not always up to snuff. That Denmark wind farm I mentioned comes to mind. In '03, in Denmark, only 3.3% of the country's electricity was credited to the towers, and 84% of the energy that they produced from those towers had to be exported at a loss. And that's because their wind was not reliable enough, and they had to keep their their plants running all the time to avoid rolling blackouts. As far as the U.S. is concerned, 2002 resulted in usable output of 12.7%, and you're thinking, how's that possible? We've got 45,000, 50,000 megawatts of energy now. How come it's only 12%, 7% of that is working? Well, you got to remember, 1.7 megawatt turbine doesn't necessarily mean it's producing 1.7 megawatts an hour. You have to have wind for wind energy to work. Ideally, a 30 mile per hour wind. So if there's no wind, or if the turbines had to be shut down because of a migrating bird or something, then you're not making any money and you're not producing any juice. Granted, this data is 10 years old, and they are more efficient now, but just to put it in perspective. Wildlife is affected, and this is a big issue. Birds get it the worst. A wind turbine, a big one, might have a sweeping radius of up to close to 2 acres, and the tips move really, really fast, like 200 miles an hour. I don't know if you've ever seen a wind turbine in person, but they're really big. And if you're a migrating bird and you try to fly through that, you're going to lose that battle. Fish and Wildlife puts the number of lost birds at 440,000 annually, but that's a lot of people believe that number is inflated. And animal habitats don't fare well either. You see the image on the right there. But the reality is pretty much all energy sources are not going to abide well with the natural habitat. A solar farm or a nuclear plant or anything. Coal burning plants and wildlife and animals and energy facilities just don't go hand in hand. Sound and visual pollution is a big one. These facilities take up a lot of space. The image you see here is from the drive between California and Arizona. Anyone who's ever made that on the 10 has seen these massive wind farms. They don't really bother me, but I don't live there. I don't have to look at them every day. As far as the sound pollution is concerned, people will try to link the sound to things like medical issues and stuff, but the reality is that experts haven't really linked a correlation yet between the noise and vibrations and health issues. But it's obviously not pleasant. I mean, they're really big pieces of equipment. They're going to make a little noise. And people complain that they drive down their property prices having these things near because no one wants to live near them. So in conclusion, every energy source needs time. Every machine that's ever been invented really needs time. Every mode of transportation needs time. When the automobile first came around, a horse was a much faster, more efficient, and safer way to get around. The wind energy business is showing tons of improvement, which is good. But the reality is wind will never be completely reliable. However, wind will be around for, forever, as far as we know anyways, and the fossil fuels that we rely so heavily on likely won't. So it's the right mentality to start pushing towards this now and start setting our goals now for wind power. I leave you with this quote: "A great wind is blowing, and it gives you either imagination or a headache." It's from Catherine the Great. My name again is Joseph Shaw. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please email me at jcshaw@email.arizona.edu.